Hello there. Be in no doubt, if you are a believer in traditional British values, the UK left wing is gearing up to vilify and destroy you. While North America and swathes of Europe look set to move from the left to the political right in elections this year, the socialists in the UK are gearing up to take the UK into very deep red territory. All powered by an electorate that is blinded by the two-party state system and appears to look no further. But you only have to look to the SNP in Scotland to see what happens when the left get their claws on the levers of power, and to a slightly lesser extent, Labour in Wales. The formation of these Scottish laws and law enforcement bodies that kowtow to their socialist masters, while taking aim at anything to the right of Karl Marx. And without the bravery of J.K. Rowling, we might never have had this illustrated to us so starkly. She got into her political car, squared up, and drove headlong at the authorities in a game of chicken, and the Scottish establishment blinked and swerved. And now we have the case of Rowling not being prosecuted and not even getting the promised non-crime hate incident on her record. And get this, neither does the SNP leader Humza Yousaf over his white talk. But Tory MSP Murdo Fraser does get one of those non-crime hate incident thingies on his record for, as I understand it, a retweet that, as far as I can see, broke no laws. Now factor in the 600,000 quid gone walkabouts from the SNP accounts, and a luxury motorhome, to which there has been no satisfactory explanation and a glacially slow investigation by Police Scotland, and you get the idea. There you have it, protection for the politically powerful, running from those too big to face up to, but singling out your political opponents. Sounds like the SNP has been taking lessons from the Biden administration. Soon to come south, when Labour gets the keys to number 10. Now many in the UK are fed up to the back teeth with the non-conservative con-socialist party. Just about everyone I know thinks they are as pinko left as the rest of them, like Labour, the SNP, the Greens and the Lib Dems. Record legal and illegal migration, which not only are the Tories doing nothing realistic to stop, but they also expect the taxpayer to fund it all. All those hotels for a start. And if we do build new houses, I can bet who gets the keys to them. And record taxes to pay for it all, while ensuring we still send billions overseas. So you would be hard-pressed to think of the Tories as centre ground, let alone right or even far right. Well, no, one person does. Listen to what Labour MP Clive Lewis says about the Tories and his socialist approach to what he says needs doing.
I've just got back from Berlin, where I've been at a conference for left-wing MPs across Europe to discuss and develop strategies for defeating the far right in politics. Now, as you're probably aware, across the world, across Europe, in the United States, the far right are on the rise. In Hungary, in Sweden, we have far right governments now in place who are doing all they can to undermine democracy and make life as hard as possible for centre-left and left parties. But there have been some notable successes. Poland and in Spain, where left-wing parties have been able to stop and defeat the rise of the far right. But that could be temporary. Here in the UK, we have a far-right government that openly uses racism and Islamophobia to divide communities, talks openly about legislation for deportations and sending people to Rwanda. There were two key things that came out of this conference, in my opinion, that I think are worthy of note in this very brief video. The first is that accommodating far-right ideas does not benefit social democratic or left parties. What it's done when they've done it has mainstreamed far-right ideas on deportations, on immigration, and general racism. What we need to do, and this was the other bit that came out, is talk about things that we're strong on. That means having policies that tackle poverty, that tackle the climate crisis, that build homes, that invest in public transport, that give people proper terms and conditions at work and an increased living standards. That means investing in infrastructure and in our future. That's what social democratic parties did after the Second World War with the defeat of fascism in that war. That's what we must do again if we're to stop the rise of the far right and the fascists that sit just behind them with their ideas, which are now being mainstreamed in our public discourse. There's a lot of work to be done, but if we can get this right, we can actually turn the tide against the far right.
Needless to say that Clive Lewis is a member of the Socialist Campaign Group of Labour MPs, whose president is one Dennis Skinner, and Tony Benn was a founding member, and the membership of 35 includes Diane Abbott, Apsana Begum, Richard Bergen, Dawn Butler, Jeremy Corbyn, who, although having the whip removed, is still, as I understand it, a member of the Labour Party, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Andy MacDonald and Ian MacDonald, amongst many others, none of which, as far as I can see, is anywhere near the centre ground of politics, as the name of the group, the Socialist Campaign Group of Labour MPs, suggests. So this, I would surmise, is what the future holds for the UK. From what Clive Lewis said, the hard left will be pressing for totally open borders and the scrapping of any deportation mechanisms. After all, talk about controlling immigration and deporting undesirable people is far right, isn't it? Well, according to him and his ilk anyway. And I just loved that talk about accommodating far-right ideas not being beneficial to social democratic parties. Well, the reverse is also true. And he calls the Tories far-right. That makes him extreme far-left as far as I'm concerned. But most Brits are for controlling borders and deporting the criminals amongst the newcomers. And that's where the new hate crimes will come in, especially where they can be used on a blasphemy basis in favour of Labour's now preferred demographic. And as to rebuilding Britain, how's he gonna pay for it? More tax, borrow and spend, of course. Because true growth can only be generated by hard-working people who keep most of the reward. And they don't stay around when the tax bill goes through the roof. Or they lay down their tools and put their hands out like everyone else. But there's also the wealth and windfall taxes to screw anyone who has any money left. Or maybe he's hoping they'll get a juicy IMF bailout. And to do what Lewis wants, we will of course have to suffer an even more bloated public sector, soaking up the profits of an ever-shrinking wealth-creating private sector. Now he might be sticking with the normal politicians thinking that just keeping growing the population and we'll have ever-growing GDP, so job done. Except the Tories have already exhausted that one and proved it's a total dud. Now, as I said, once Labour is in government, they will, in all probability, whatever they tell you today, expand the SNP's hate crimes approach into the rest of the UK. But they won't be taking on the big targets like J.K. Rowling. Oh no, they'll start with ordinary people to put them firmly in their place. And right now we're being told that our judges in England and Wales, who are generally also very left of centre, are looking at reducing sentences for those from deprived or difficult backgrounds or low academic achievers. That means selectively low sentences or none at all on the subjective thoughts of a lefty judge for certain sectors of society. even though it was found recently that more than 80% of shoplifters reoffend within a year of leaving prison, even if they get caught, prosecuted and jailed in the first place. We can definitely expect more of that. So those deemed as having oodles of white privilege will, I assume, be handed out the heftiest sentences. Something that will skew the prison stats in the wokists' direction. Ooh, look at all these whites in prison, they will say. Overall, a Labour government is going to make the Tories look like a masterclass in public administration. Oh yes, it will be that cataclysmically bad.